After the independent journalist Nick Shirley's investigative video on Minnesota daycare fraud went viral, the Department of Homeland Security has launched a door-to-door investigation in Minneapolis targeting suspected childcare and broader fraud cases involving taxpayer funds. Under Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, DHS and ICE agents are conducting a large-scale probe, with officials signaling arrests where abuse is uncovered. The American people deserve answers on how their taxpayer money is being used, and arrests when abuse is found, DHS official X account post read. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's office has rejected fraud claims following a viral video showing visits to several childcare centers across the state, including one accused of receiving millions in state funds despite appearing mostly inactive. Addressing the allegations raised in the video shared by independent journalist Nick Shirley, a spokesperson told Fox News that Walz has long worked to combat fraud and has implemented stronger oversight measures, including launching investigations into multiple facilities.
The governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight, including launching investigations into these specific facilities, one of which was already closed. He hired an outside firm to audit payments to high-risk programs, shut down the Housing Stabilization Services program entirely, announced a new statewide program integrity director, and supported criminal prosecutions.
The statement came after Shirley released a 42-minute video on Friday on X and YouTube, showing visits to multiple daycare centers across the Democratic-leaning state, including one on Nicollet Avenue in Minneapolis. The video triggered a wave of backlash over the weekend, with Walz facing criticism from several prominent figures, including Vice President JD Vance, Representative Mike Lawler of New York, Donald Trump Jr., and Elon Musk. What was the video about? What more is there to know about the Minnesota daycare fraud? Let's dive deep into the story.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is facing growing scrutiny after a viral video raised questions about state-funded daycare centers. The video shows visits to multiple childcare facilities, including locations that reportedly received millions in public funds. Independent journalist Nick Shirley released the footage on X, which quickly gained traction across social media platforms. One daycare highlighted in the video appeared largely inactive despite allegedly receiving substantial state funding. The footage drew support from high-profile figures, including Elon Musk and FBI Director Kash Patel. Tesla and ex-CEO Elon Musk amplified Shirley's claims, reposting an interview accusing Democrats of making fraudulent payments to illegal immigrants. FBI Director Kash Patel announced that the Bureau had deployed additional personnel and investigative resources to Minnesota. Patel said the move was part of ongoing efforts to dismantle fraud schemes exploiting federal programs. He noted that resources were deployed even before the video gained widespread online attention. He stated that the FBI remains focused on protecting taxpayer funds and aid intended for vulnerable communities. The FBI director said additional fraud investigations in Minnesota are ongoing and expanding. The footage went viral amid a growing scandal around the Walz administration, with at least $1 billion allegedly lost to social services fraud, largely tied to the Somali community in the Twin Cities. Reports claim over $1 billion was siphoned from Minnesota COVID programs, with some alleging portions of the funds may have reached overseas extremist groups. Governor Walz's office has pushed back, saying the administration has worked to crack down on fraud.
At least 14 Minnesota state-run programs have been flagged for fraud, and First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson on December 19th said that the federal investigators believe a substantial share of the roughly $18 billion paid through Medicaid to Minnesota programs may have been fraudulent. What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes, Thompson said. It's swamping Minnesota.
I spoke in the fall about the iceberg I saw ahead. Something's fraud that's much larger than what's been visible to the public. When I said that, it wasn't hyperbole or rhetoric, it was a warning. And today I want to talk and I want to show here a sense of what that iceberg looks like, because I think people deserve to know what that is and how big this problem is, because we can't solve the problem until we grapple with the size of it. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services pulled the claims data for these 14 programs dating back to 2018. And those 14 programs in Minnesota have cost $18 billion since 2018 and more than $3.5 billion in 2024 alone. So that's a sense of the magnitude of the problem. These are the 14 Medicaid programs, which is just a part of Medicaid, these waivered services that have been flagged as having issues with program integrity and fraud. Now, I'm sure everyone is wondering how much of this $18 billion was fraud. It's not the $1 million question, that's the $18 billion question. The answer is far too much, and the task ahead of all of us is not only figuring out how much of that money was fraud, because we know a significant amount was, but figuring out how to put an end to the fraud in our state and get control of it. So let me end with this before I take questions. The magnitude of the fraud in Minnesota cannot be overstated. It's staggering amounts of money that have been lost.
The latest findings could reinforce President Donald Trump's claims that Minnesota has become a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity under Governor Tim Walz, the Democrats' vice presidential nominee in last year's election. Earlier, on December 4th, Senator Kennedy went on a rampage on the Senate floor over a $1 billion Somali daycare fraud scandal, explaining what was happening in Minnesota.
What I'm about to tell you, Mr. President, let me apologize in advance, is deeply disgusting. It's deeply disgusting. I mean, it is clown world on steroids. And when I first read about this, Mr. President, I read it a second time because I experienced slack-jawed astonishment. And when I read it a second time and I realized it was true, I just wanted to run away screaming. What am I talking about, Mr. President? We have discovered, the federal prosecutors have discovered, that for the last 5 years, there has been massive welfare fraud in the great state of Minnesota. Massive. Over $1 billion of American taxpayer money has been stolen. Just stolen. They can call it fraud, but a better term would be stealing. And this fraud has been centered in the Somali community in Minnesota. Now, I'm not here to criticize the Somali community. I'm here simply to describe what happened. The Somali community in Minneapolis is about 80,000 people. They're centered around Minneapolis. And let me say it again. I'm not here to denigrate the Somali people or people of Somali ancestry just because of the actions of a few. But it is a fact that this $1 billion in welfare fraud occurred almost exclusively in the Somali community in Minnesota and was orchestrated by people with Somali ancestry. That's a fact. Facts aren't racist. Facts are facts. So far, 59 people have been convicted. 86 have been charged. and 78 of them are of Somali ancestry. That's just a fact.